In the Quick Start section, we used the menu screens when we were setting up your camera. Let's dive in a little deeper and I'll show you how to make a few more adjustments. Press the menu button and then use the multi-selector to highlight Shooting Menu. Scroll down to Image Size and change this to Large. Now this will create very high resolution images and allow you to make terrific enlargements. If you need smaller files for email or the web, it's always easy to do that later. You'll take up a little more space on your memory card with these larger files, but SD cards are reusable and inexpensive. Next, go into Image Quality. Now I like to change this to JPEG Fine. This setting will record images at the highest quality JPEG setting. You can also set the image quality to NEF, which stands for Nikon Electronic Format. This is Nikon's version of a RAW file that contains all of the image information that's captured by the sensor, along with the camera's settings, the lens used, and other useful information before it is processed into a final image by the camera. RAW files, once downloaded, are typically processed later in software, but the D5100 offers in-camera NEF processing through the Retouch menu, which allows you to make fun and creative changes to the final image before it's downloaded. While we're talking about these settings, this is a good time to introduce you to another powerful control, the command dial. Now the command dial offers a quick way to adjust many different settings just by using your thumb. Let me give you an example. If I select Scene on the Mode dial, I can use the command dial to scroll through a wide selection of other scene modes, seen here on the monitor. As you become more familiar with your Nikon, you'll find that you can use the command dial to adjust and change a wide variety of settings and functions, quickly and easily. Let's talk about some of the other controls and buttons on your camera. And remember, if you ever need any help locating these, there's a great diagram in the beginning of your user's manual. This is the Release Mode selector. This allows you to choose what happens when you press the shutter button. You can choose to take one picture at a time, or a sequence of images as you hold the button down. This button, with the question mark next to it, is the Help button. Whenever you're in a screen that displays this question mark icon, you can press the Help button to get a brief description of the selected option or function. It's very handy as you start to learn about your camera. Now while we're looking at the monitor here, let me take a moment to talk about this bright, high-resolution, 3-inch vari-angle LCD monitor. As you've seen, this is the primary way to view images, menus, settings, and shooting information. The shooting information display comes up when you turn the camera on, or if you press this info button on the back of the camera. This gives you a quick view of your camera's current settings, including how many more pictures you can store on your SD card, how much battery charge is left, exposure settings, and other useful information. Now in some instances, messages will appear automatically on the camera's monitor. For example, when the light is too low to shoot, or there's no SD card installed. Another nice feature is that the graphics on the LCD monitor rotate automatically when you turn the camera. Here's another great use of the LCD monitor. Rotate this switch with the LV next to it, and you'll activate Live View mode, so that you can see the actual image on the LCD monitor instead of through the viewfinder. Now this is a great way to frame up your shots, both for stills and videos, and you'll be able to use many of the automatic modes while in live view, including the autofocus modes. But here's one of the really cool features of this monitor. In normal use, the monitor is facing out, up against the camera. But if you want to take a low or high angle shot, just flip the monitor out like this and turn the monitor so that you can easily see the image no matter where you place the camera. You can even spin the monitor completely around so that you can take a self-portrait. Okay, click off the live view by pushing the LV switch again. And let's take a look through the viewfinder. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a display of basic exposure information such as aperture and shutter speed. In the middle of the screen, you'll see a series of small squares and brackets. These are indicators for the autofocus and exposure settings. I'll show you how to work these a little later in the DVD. This button with the arrow icon is the playback button. Use this in combination with the multi-selector to review the pictures and videos you've taken. While you're in the playback mode, you can press this button with the minus sign to go into the thumbnail mode, and you'll see a number of pictures at once. Keep pressing and you'll see more and more pictures until the calendar appears. Now use the multi-selector to select a day, and you can go back and look at the images you took on that particular day. To get back to the full frame image, just press this other button with the plus sign. Okay, let me show you one more thing, the in-camera retouch functions. You get to the retouch menu by pressing the menu button and scroll down the left side until you come to the icon of the brush. The retouch menu lets you create trimmed, resized, or retouched copies of the pictures you've taken. You can even take care of red eye, for instance, right in the camera. Now let's take a minute and talk about these Nikon scene modes. Your D5100 has 18 auto shooting modes, including 5 scene modes that you can access directly on the mode dial. Simply select a scene mode that matches the situation you're in, and the camera automatically chooses the best settings for that type of scene. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? We already use the auto mode for point and shoot simplicity, but there's also the auto flash off mode, which is ideal to use where flash photography is prohibited or when a flash would create an unwanted reflection. Portrait mode offers soft, natural skin tones and slightly blurs the background so that your subject stands out. Landscape gives you sharp, vividly colored pictures with an emphasis on blues and greens. Child mode is tailored for soft skin tones and vivid clothing and background colors. The sports mode freezes motion so you can capture athletes in action. The close-up mode is designed to give you detailed shots of flowers, insects, and other small objects. Now put the mode dial to scene and use the command dial to choose from 11 more scene modes. These cover a wide variety of typical shooting situations, and from their names, I think you'll understand their uses. But if you have any questions, just check out your user manual for more information. What I like about all these scene modes is that just by trying them out, you may create some pictures you never thought you could do. And I think you'll love the results. For example, one of my favorites is Night Portrait, which uses the slow sync capabilities of the camera to achieve a nice balance between the flash lighting the people in the foreground and the ambient light of the background. Next, I want to tell you about the effects mode. By using the command dial, you can easily choose one of 7 different special effects that can really expand your creativity. These are effects that you used to have to do with photo manipulation software at some later time. Now, 2 of my favorites are miniature and selective color. The miniature effect selectively blurs all but the center of the image, simulating a miniature effect that makes even the largest subjects look like small toys. And selective color lets you choose a specific color within the image and then records all the rest of the colors as black and white. Both of these options work with both still images and movies. Again, take a look through your user manual to learn about some of the other effects, or better yet, just try them out on your own and see what they do. Now let's talk about the remarkable focusing capabilities of your D5100. In general, there are 2 aspects of focus: focus mode, which determines how your camera will handle the autofocus functions, and AF area mode, which determines what the camera will focus on within the frame. When you're using the viewfinder, you have a number of focus mode options. To choose one, press the I button, select focus mode, and press OK. You'll see 4 choices. AFA stands for Auto Servo AF, where the camera will automatically select the appropriate focus mode based on the motion of the subject. AFS means Single Servo AF, and in this mode the focus will lock when the shutter release is pressed halfway down. This is usually used when taking images of stationary subjects. AFC is short for Continuous Servo AF, where the camera is continuously focusing while the shutter release is pressed halfway. This is best for shooting fast-moving subjects. The last focus mode is MF, for manual focus, where you control the focus yourself. To select an AF area mode, press the I and select AF area and hit OK. Now here you'll see a few icons. The first one is Single Point AF. To use this, you use the multi-selector to choose one of 11 focus points indicated by the small squares within the frame, and the camera will focus on that point. Next is Dynamic Area AF. Here you select a focus point again, but the camera will also consider the nearby points if the subject moves within the frame. The third option is 3D tracking. This is similar to dynamic area AF, except it will track focus on a moving subject anywhere within the frame covered by the 11 focus points. The last option is auto area AF, and in this mode, the camera will automatically detect the subject within the frame and select the appropriate focus point. Now, as I said, these are the autofocus functions available when you're using the viewfinder, and you'll find that using the viewfinder allows for quicker focusing than using the live view feature. And later in this DVD, we'll show you some of the ways to use autofocus when using live view. Finally, let's talk about these modes, indicated by the P, S, A, and M here on the mode dial. To fully understand what these do, I should first take a minute to go over the basics of exposure. It all begins with light. Your camera has a powerful image sensor, the part of the camera that collects the light from the lens to create an image. The sensitivity of the image sensor is called the ISO setting. This camera has an ISO rating that adjusts from 100 all the way up to an amazing 6400. But the important thing to remember is that the higher the ISO, the less light you need to get a good picture. Now that leads to the second component of exposure, the shutter speed. The shutter is the mechanical part of the camera that opens and closes to let a certain amount of light hit the sensor. The shutter can operate automatically from as slow as 30 seconds to as fast as 1/4000th of a second. You can also keep the shutter open for several minutes in the bulb mode. Now, the higher the shutter speed, the easier it is to get photographs that freeze the action of a fast-moving subject. The slower the shutter speed, the more blurring. So the first component of exposure is the sensor sensitivity, or the ISO. The second is the shutter speed, and that leaves the third part, the aperture setting. The aperture is the section of your lens that allows more or less light to pass through. It's actually a diaphragm that opens and closes. Those settings are represented by f-stops. The smaller the f-stop number, the larger the opening and the more light is let in. The aperture also affects something else called depth of field. Depth of field is the range of distance that's in focus within a picture. With a small aperture, like f/22, more of your scene is in focus, with a greater depth of field, while a larger aperture, like f/3.5, gives you a shallower depth of field. It's an optical thing, but as you learn to use it, you can add a lot of creativity to your images. All three of these parts work together to actually take the picture, and they all affect each other as well. Close down the aperture, and the shutter speed decreases. Increase the ISO, and the shutter speed increases. In fact, one of the key benefits of a higher ISO is that you can shoot pictures using a higher shutter speed, even in lower light. Your Nikon D5100 also has an auto ISO feature that allows you to select the exact shutter speed and aperture while the ISO is adjusted automatically to ensure proper exposure. Okay, so now that exposure school is over, let's get back to those P, S, A, and M settings. Let's start with S, which stands for Shutter Priority Auto Mode. In this setting, you choose the shutter speed and the camera chooses the aperture it needs for correct exposure. Now this is great when you want to either freeze action or creatively blur moving objects. A is for Aperture Priority Auto Mode, where you choose the aperture and then the camera selects the correct shutter speed. This is perfect when you want to soften the background or make sure that everything is in focus from near objects to far. And M is for the manual mode. In this setting, you select both the shutter speed and aperture for your creative intent. When you use this in combination with the auto ISO setting, you can control the amount of action blur and depth of field while the camera still gives you a proper exposure. And then there's P for Programmed Auto Mode. Here the camera automatically selects both the shutter and the aperture. But wait, you might say, isn't that the same as the auto mode? Well, it's close. But in P mode, you can use the command dial to actually change the relationship between the shutter speed and the aperture while maintaining the same exposure. It also allows you to control the use of the flash. Okay, I know I went over a lot of information in the last few minutes, but once you spend a little time with your D5100, I think you'll get it all in no time. Of course, if you missed a few things, you can always go back and watch this section of the DVD again. I won't mind. And don't forget the user's manual. It's chock full of answers as well. I suggest you keep it with you in your camera bag so you can refer to it whenever you need to. So, now that we've had a chance to go over some of the technical stuff, let's head out and start taking some pictures. In the next section, Capture the Moment, my friend Matt is going to show you how to use many of the amazing features of your Nikon D5100 to take terrific images and videos. Matt's an avid photographer, and I think you're going to learn a lot of valuable information about your camera, as well as pick up a bunch of useful tips and suggestions along the way. Then, I'll join you again at the end of this DVD to introduce you to some Nikon lenses and accessories, as well as talk about some great ways to share your work. See you on the other side.